not enough cut them anymore, but congratulations. I'm very fortunate, I think we're very fortunate to have you, and I'm excited about working with you.
Thank you.
The next year.
Well, I'm looking forward to working with everyone. So the first part of my report is going to be about the Regents' results. In preparation, actually look at this. In preparation to not just present this dry report on this is how our students did, what I did was to go through and look at how our students have actually been doing historically for the last 9 years on these Regents exams. So I'm actually going to have what you're looking at up here on the PowerPoint. So this group right here, if you want, and if you want to, of course, feel free to turn around. Okay. That's right. Are there enough? Let me see how that is. Do you have enough? There should be enough in the back. Okay. So first of all, what I have is just a list of all of the students. I didn't tell you numbers that will appear on the table on the next page. Just to give you an idea, some background and reminders that when students take the Regents exam, generally they need a 65 to pass. If they're a CSC student, they can get a 60 or 55, and that can be considered passing. Okay, so you may notice a little bit of a change. So what I've done is these are each of the Regents exams that we've given. We give 10, all schools offer 10 Regents exams in June. You can see I've listed the teacher, the grade that they teach, the high score, the number of students that receive that score, and then the actual true percentage of passing, including our CSC students. So I've listed that information. A couple of things I want to point out. Again, I've already said one of them was that the CSC students, their safety net is a 55 to a 64. Another thing that I want to point out that you may not be familiar with, but this year we started our regional scoring process. So in-house, staff were not allowed necessarily to score in-house. For instance, when I was a chemistry teacher, I would not have been allowed to score my chemistry Regents. We had to have enough certified teachers within the department to score my exam. For some Regents exams you require 2 staff members, some is 3. So depending on if we have the right number of certified people, and obviously in some areas it's more difficult, staff were required to go elsewhere. For instance, we had integrated algebra, algebra 2 trig, global, living environment, this should have said earth science, it's a typo, chemistry and physics. All of those staff members that were certified teachers in those areas actually went to Gouverneur to score regionally. They scored ours, Gouverneur, and Clifton Valley.
It was fun.
Actually, many of the staff did report that it was a positive experience. I'm not going to say that there wasn't some small hiccups to move through, but most people had, I think, something positive to say from that. Although not a Regents exam any longer, we did have our Spanish teachers go to Canton for 2.5 days to correct their, you may remember all of our APPR fund that we talked about throughout the year with the post-assessments. They spent 2.5 days in Canton doing some regional corrections. We did have 4 exams corrected in-house. I guess this should have been earth science. Sorry, that was my mistake still. English, geometry, U.S. history, and living environment, we were able to correct right here in-house. Again, the teacher that was the person that instructed the class was not in the room. They were separated from the process. So this is just a bit of an overview. Oops. On the next page, this is our actual results. You can see in English we had 30 students, integrated algebra 47, 24 geometry. You can see these are the number of students that we had take the exam. These are the students that fell into certain categories, 0 to 54, clearly not meeting the standards. 55 to 64, now this again may have been some of our CSC students. I didn't delineate them out. So this could be some of our CSC students falling into this gap. 65 to 84, and then of course what our target is the 85 to 100 group. So
Amy,
this
can
is,
I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yeah,
I just
sure.
want to say, when Amy says CSE students, that's a real range of students. Because there's CSE students who are in there academically, it should be, and then there's CSE students who are in there for social. reasons.
Are we
And I mean
seeing
social as far as seeing other people, mixing in with your peers. So when she's saying CSE, I don't want people to take it negatively, that every CSE child, may or may not do well. What she's trying to
Absolutely.
say is,
Right,
There's a range of
certainly,
CSE.
just to give you, yes. So this is an overview of the results we have for this year. What I did was to take our results, because I didn't have current results for the year that we're in. I took and looked at the last 9 years for the entire state, and then our last 9 years, not including the current year that we're in, to get an idea of where we stand. Utilizing, again, the same categories of 0 to 54, the exact same exams, and it gave me these percentages. Obviously I had to put this information up. It wasn't presented just as this. I had to manipulate the data. So I think this is somewhat cumbersome. This, I think, is a much better way to look at the data. So the blue. The blue is the New York State average for the last 9 years for students who score in the range of 65 to 100. So technically passing the Regents. So New York State, again, all the students which we're a part of would be the blue, the first bar. The maroon, or the middle, is us for the last 9 years. And you can see for every single exam, we are above New York State. The last column is how we did this year in comparison to the last 9. Just want to point out, pretty much the exams have been standard for the last 9 years, minus math. All right, there was a transition. Most of us probably had course 1, course 2, course 3. Then we moved to a math A and a math B where there was no middle regions. Now we're back to a integrated algebra, geometry, HUT trip. All right, so I want to just point out the math data is very, the data is much smaller that's available. But you can still see, we are clearly, for the average, we are always well above, which I was so excited to see. So I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to get for data. I also want to point out, you can see that clearly, HUT is probably one of the hardest regions that are offered, based on the passing rate. And then, after that, it looks like probably global. All right, so again, just trying to present a larger picture of what our data looks like.
What is global?
10th grade global studies, European history. They take
it's a
it back in
combination
history.
of 9th and 10th grade, and they take the region at the end of 2 years, which again, I think severely impacts their scoring.
Right, yeah, this is 2 years of study, and then all of a sudden you're going to take an exam. So, and again, let me point out, in math and science, you take Regents every year. English is 3 years of study, then you take Regents. And in history, you go 9, 10, take the Regents, and then 11th grade, you take another Regents. So there are certainly proposals on the table that English is going to change. There will be a Regents exam every year. I haven't necessarily heard that about social studies, but that certainly could be out there as well. Questions?
You share this data with the teachers?
This is one I will, absolutely will, because I'm sure I knew these 2 areas because I would be interested in that. I was already aware of how, I was personally doing, but I would never, thought to check to see how Mr. Buckley was doing, so.
This is great, that's a good snapshot of that, I'm sure they would like to see that.
I agree. So the next page, again, my focus.
How we got to the bronze award again, because it's based on region scores.
Cool.
And I am not saying that, Regent scores are everything that we should base our academics on, by no means am I, using that. Again, it's one way, one measure that we can look at.
Would it be much easier to have the test Regents every year than wait 2 years or 3 years?
I've always been in a situation where it's always every year, so I would say yes to that. I mean, I'm not sure. Just like, for instance, the 7th and 8th graders take a science test, and it's based on 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, 4 years of study.
Wow.
And so basically, unfortunately, what you're doing in 8th grade is you're utilizing a good portion of your year preparing for the test. You hope that you're not spending that much time on it, but still, obviously, this is important.
Our scores in 2013 compared to the state scores, and you got it over the last 9 years, but did you compare it?
So back to this one, right? So this is the last 9, this is the last 9.
Right,
And then this is this year. I have the current data from the state on this year.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no way to get at it, so. But I thought that the tests were comparable. There were some comments made about, wow, this was the most difficult test I'd seen. But that fluctuates, you get that every now and then. I really felt like this was the best way to look at data. And certainly I'm up for, if you have some other suggestions for me, things you want me to look at, I certainly will do that. This is very important to me. How are our students, the top achievers, how are they doing in comparison to the state? Again, blue is the average percentage of students that are scoring in an 85 to 100. So the average students in New York State on the English Regents, this is the range that we've got. So you can see that again from the state. Maroon is us over the last 9 years. Clearly, in many areas, we are doing very well. This is this year. The orange would be this year. There's some areas that stand out. Again, I'm noticing when I see this, some of the areas, right here, again, I want to point out, these are 3 new Regents exams. They came out in 2009. We're still working on that. I certainly have some ideas on how I hope to help the staff to get what they need for resources for these areas. You can see again, global, we've got some more work to do in some of these classes, but I look at this, for instance, this one obviously is striking to me. Look at that. This is the state average, this is this year. We're clearly always above, but that's just incredible. So I was really excited to see this data. I thought our students are really doing well. We have some work to do, some areas that I think by looking at the data like this kind of pinpoints where I want to focus, where we need staff to focus, but I'm quite pleased with what I came away with once I looked this data over.
Do you know how we compare regionally just to this area?
Okay, so,
What do you should ask?
what do you should ask?
I read it.
So you look at it. So I looked on New York State report card, tried to find schools similar size. Tupper Lake is not similar size. They have almost 900 students. We're in the mid 600s. But I wanted to look at free and reduced lunch socioeconomic to see. I should have used Brazier. I didn't find that. I'm going through all the counties, looking through all the schools. I came up with Tupper Lake. They had a very similar free and reduced percentage of students that were eligible. So I didn't create a graph for this one. I know, I needed to, I agree. But just to give you an idea, I thought we're still quite similar, especially if we take a look at English. I used only 1 year of data this time. I didn't compile all 10 years of data. All right, that's not, although it seems like it's just right at your fingertips, it really takes some work to get to it. And then transform it into this format. 38% in 85 to 100, we're at 41%. 11% for the algebra, we're at 15%. So if you go down through and look, you can see, yes, again, there's some fluctuations. Some of it's staffing. It might be the group of students that you have that one particular year. I know, for instance, in the high school, we had one particular group that we knew was going to struggle on a certain Regents exam, and they did. But I'd say we're doing all right. Obviously depends on the instructor. Some stand out more than others. But I didn't walk away leaving with a feeling that we were in some way not meeting the standards of those Regents exams. I felt very confident once I was done looking at all this data over. I was like I said, I was just excited. I couldn't wait to tell you. Because I just think this really reflects, especially this.
So that's a good story, so how do we make sure people understand that we have good
I was
stories?
gonna suggest we should put these graphs in our next newsletter.
Yeah.
We could. I certainly can't wait to present it to the staff.
Mhm.
I agree with you, that more people need to see this,
I
to
agree.
see how our students are doing, how we are personally doing as a school.
I think a lot of this combined with our graduation scores, our percentage of students going to college,
You're
I
reading
think
my
all of
mind.
that combined is really a
You're
good
both
story.
a really good story, Lon.
So some of the things that I want to work on, continue working on, is I want to present how we did the start reading. I've had time to get to that, to look at that data and see where we're standing. I want to look at graduation rates. And you said one more.
College.
College, that's definitely a group that I would love to follow up with, because again, this is one measure. And really, ultimately, to me, it's for those students who are out there going to college or military career. Are they successful? Are they doing what we needed? Did we prepare them? And that's very important to me, getting that feedback. So that, I'm going to need to talk to Ms. Alford about that, because it's really difficult to track students once they leave the building. to get them to, again, fill out the student survey, tell us how you think you did. I know many of our staff, when the students come back, because they love to come back into the building, we'll ask them, how'd you do? How can I help you? Did you feel like you were prepared? And I think that's conversations that we need to continue having with them. Where did you go wrong? What did you end up in a remedial class? Because that's what's driving all of these mandates that we're seeing, is the fact that our students are leaving the building and required to do remediation at the collegiate level. And that means we're not doing our job somewhere. So how can we help that?
So this is the kind of stuff we can expect every time?
Well, I'm going to do my best to try, in my mind, those are things that are churning. So I'm hoping for the next meeting we can talk about our star reading results at the high school level. Again, having some data to look at, because I think this really reflects it in a way that makes it obvious where we're going. Graduation rate, I need to do some work with that to determine, because I just don't want to look at how many graduated, because I know there's little nuances about they graduated last year, this year, and how they're placed within that. So again, hey, I need to talk to Ms. Alford about that some more. But questions about this?
Can we go back to that one graph on the one with earth science and,
You want
yeah,
this?
down there?
Yeah.
Any ideas on global, why global is so low this year and why earth science is so high?
One thing I can tell you about global is when a student doesn't pass it one year, they come back and they'll attempt to take it in January and then in June, and then if it's offered in August, they'll do that. This group did have, and I didn't remove them because truly they did take it. This group did have 4 or 5 students who retook the exam again.
It also has notoriously been a score that's come up for us.
Right, that's, well, and again,
Summer school for it, the year before we had numerous students.
it doesn't have, in comparison, I know A2T is, A2T again, remember that's a class you take as a junior. If you don't go to BOCES, you're put into A2T. This is a class that all students are required to take. And it's notoriously been very difficult.
Right. Earth science used to be a very difficult regions to take, and I noticed that this is off the chart here almost. And the middle brown one is the average.
I don't want to toot the science department's horn, but look at this. This is the state average from
Come on,
9 years. And look at this. It's almost double, you guys. That's amazing. That's incredible.
That's also historical for our district, and it's because we've had the same science department for years.
Yeah, but it's not.
And it's impressive.
So any guesses on why the earth science is so high?
This one year,
Yes.
no. Tomorrow, next time, might be able to enlighten us. Again, like I
There's
said,
also a high number of 8th graders. No, wait, not there yet.
They're living in Mark.
Okay, the
That
9th
group of
graders who are
strong
taking
kids.
it, the other group of, there was
There's
a high
always
number
somewhere.
of honors kids that are taking that course, which I think, makes.
Well, I think-
I'm sure it's going to be amazing instruction that they're receiving.
Well, I think you should find out when you do these, and you have these results of why one's very, very low. Not for headhunting, but for the purpose of what can we do different. And one, when it's very high, what are we doing that's bringing this on, and what can we do? Can we bring that over into other courses? That's
No, I
exciting.
agree. And one of the things I felt like when I was doing this was unfortunate that my staff, the staff weren't available. Once I looked at this and had the time to look at it, it's after Regents Week and everyone's gone. And I just, wanted to show all of them, look at what you've done. And have those conversations about, what happened here, what happened here.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to know.
Me too.
I think it's a great idea. If you're having global is consistently very, very low for everybody, all right? If it's very low for certain groups, okay, you know the class makeup, and we don't. But your earth science one is off the chart. Was there a reason for it? Did they have a lot of the year
I don't know what
before?
you think, Mr. Thomas.
I didn't grade those.
That wasn't mentioned, right?
Let's end that way.
So anyway, it was a fairly challenging,
That's-
an average challenging test this year.
Are they still graded on the curve? How are
Okay,
they
so-
graded?
This is interesting, and again, I can speak from the area of science, especially, again, because all students have to take the English exam. physical, all students have to take US history, LE, and then one of the three. But generally here at our school, this would be the first two. Chemistry and physics are scored on a negative curve, which means, for instance, you might miss 10 questions and get maybe an 82. It follows a bell curve, and some of the exams are scored very, very differently. There's many comments frequently on the science listservs that especially the upper exams are not scored the same way as the lower exams. So it's very difficult.
Yeah, there's things a little more generous conversion.
Thank you. It's very difficult for some of these kids to reach the 85 to 100 range on some of our high-end tests.
The global one particularly, I remember one of my daughters took the test, got an 80-something, retook the test the next time it was offered, missed more questions and got a 90-something.
Right. You can miss, for instance, 2 to 3 questions on one of the tests and still get like a 98, 99. But if you did that down here or here, you might get a 92. It's
And like for the English language arts, sometimes, it's nearly impossible to get between like a 95 and 100. You have to get 10 question wrong. It gets, each question starts to take on a life of its own and creep up. It gets pretty.
right. Very few people are going to score in that range. And that's why at the very first page where it lists the high scores, it's very difficult to get in that, especially 95 to 100 range. Those are some of our top students doing that.
After looking at that, now, because our average is low in the state, is it just because we have such a high percentage of special needs students that it brings us down state level comparatively?
You mean for the 85 to 100 range?
Yeah, I mean, when we got that report card back from the state, we were kind of down lower, but to look at that, I mean, it looks like we're.
On the Regents exams, back to this graph,
Tom, are you talking about the ELA and math?
I wonder, yes, I'm assuming you're referring to
Not
the.
Regents, that's what you're referring to.
Okay.
Right, we don't have that back
Thank you.
yet, that will be another discussion once we get back down. But this is, one way I feel like we should be gauging how we're doing at high school level. How students and staff are managing, how's the academics going.
Are you going to set goals for these, our teachers? See, the board is asking, we want to set some goals to help the educational system.
Obviously, I would like all students to pass, that's not realistic. I understand that, that would be my goal, that everyone passes. This would be, but if I were to say, where do I see myself focusing my energy with this group, the 85 to 100 group, our high achieving students, clearly I want to see us move in a direction where those students are provided with the challenge and the resources necessary to achieve at that level. Because they're capable, we just need to keep working on it and refining it. So, I know in the past, a standard has been that you want 80% of your students to pass. I always want 100%. I know that's not realistic, and that I'm assuming, again, based on the exam itself. Some are more difficult than others, just traditionally, not anything that we're doing wrong. But, and I feel like that's going to be a process with the teachers, talking and see, where's their comfort level. If I want 100 and they want 80, can we meet in the middle? And I know I'm not going to get 100 all the time, but there will be times when I get that will happen for us.
How come some years when they have these tests, you'll be scoring them, and then I hear teachers go, oh my goodness, this one was off the chart as far as difficult goes. Where is there consistency, or is that not a true statement?
Well, 4 of these exams had to be rescored. There was a mistake. 4 of them. So you can just imagine the staff has gone out and, been in other districts scoring. The day after they come back, the state says, oh, there was a mistake, which the staff were well aware of. They knew, because they were reading the question going, why was this on there? Well, that's not right. They know it, but then you have to wait for the state to make, to come out and address the issue, and then they can get rescored again. So this is just 4 exams out of 10, almost half of them had to be rescored, which was, again, a chore. So, I mean, I have had exams in the past, especially when there's a transition period. Back in 2002, they changed the science regencies. There was a transition period at that time frame. They came back actually in August and rescaled all the scores from the township regions that year. So, and report cards have gone out, students have graduated, GPAs have been calculated, and we're going back and putting all that in. So, I mean, it still can happen.
Didn't have to take back anybody's diploma, did you?
No, luckily, no. Right, well, no. So that's how we've done the Regents exams this year, and in the past, how we're doing so far. The next thing that I wanted to talk to you about was, I'm not going to have a presentation, it's all. If each person would take a packet and pass it along. The English department, in preparation for the new modules that are currently, by the way, on pause, but in preparation for them, for the upcoming year, to get ready with the new textbooks that are required, they did some research once their Regents exams were taken care of and scored. They did some readings looking up all the textbooks that would be required, how much the cost was going to be, if we purchased all the textbooks on the list. Now, we had talked at one meeting, maybe 2 months ago, about, is it okay if I stand? I like to stand. We talked about the text list, that there was numerous texts on there. Is it required to have all of them? Are we comfortable necessarily having our students read every text that was on the list? Some have parts in them that parents may not be comfortable with their students reading and/or instructors presenting on. So what we talked through some of these things, and I know Mrs. Kelly has mentioned that in order to have the text used, they have to be approved by the board. So if we were to go out and purchase texts for everyone to kind of take a few here and there and everyone read them, what's the best way and feasible way for us to do that? So the English department went through and looked at the cost for purchasing the texts. In addition, which I think was a great idea on their part, was they looked up prices for Kindles. And I'm not referring to a Kindle Fire where you can get on the internet or a Kindle Tower. This is a basic $69 Kindle, where if the school purchased the book, and for those of you that have e-readers, you know what I'm talking about, you get down there and purchase a book. Well, the school, because we're a school, if we purchase one book, it can go on all of the Kindles that we have. So it's the purchase of one book. So what you've seen is their hard work putting all of this together to try to come up with a way for us to make some decisions about how do we want to move forward with this process. Do we want to move forward with Kindles? Do we want to move forward with hardcover books or paperbacks? Certainly after I've talked with them at length, we have discussed maybe 16 Kindles isn't the way to go, maybe we should get 50. Mrs. Langley was able to determine that the state will cover Kindles, the version we're getting, as a textbook. So it is able, and through the textbook, and I would like to recommend that we purchase 50. So it's enough for an entire class. I've talked with Mrs. Peril, the high school English teacher, and she thinks that's a great idea. We would have enough for instance, the seniors to utilize. The subscription for the books is $500, I think, for all of the books that they would need. And it does include maybe there was one book you can't get an ebook from. I want to say, What Arabs
Think.
What Arabs Think. So we would really love to move forward with this. They're anxious. Again, there hasn't been a decision made necessarily with the modules. We've printed some of this information out. We're taking a look at it. But in preparation for that, at the English department and myself, we feel like this is a good move in the right direction. So they wanted you to see this is what originally, again, they were intending that we purchase 60, put all the books on it, between the board members, administrators, and the English department, we could all be reading these books. But once we recognized and found that they're able, through the textbook money,
Is there another district doing Kindles?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Could the student bring their Kindles in if they got one, and get the program put on theirs,
It has to be through the school. The account has to be through the school. So any additional Kindles that we purchase, though, like say the sixth graders are going to get them, they would have access, not that they would want the same text level, the reading level that would be 9 through 12, but it's available.
So what do you think the lifetime of a Kindle would be in a hand-to-hand with 10th grader?
When I think of this, this is my thought. One textbook is $70. Like obviously it's requisition time. I'm looking through these. One textbook is $70. This is the price of a textbook. And you get maybe 10 years out of that. I'm guessing that as newer versions of Kindles come out, we'll continue to purchase them, these will trickle down. Mrs. Kelly recommended that we look into like, some type of, maybe a student deposit, maybe a student insurance, some way for us to get a little bit of a safety coverage on it, should a student decide to completely break it, what are we gonna do then? Because we're out there.
What do you do now if they destroy a book?
Same thing, you charge them, but it doesn't mean that
Rarely
they're
when
going
we
to
get
get
money.
Right,
Oh, right, you can't get the money.
yeah. So if we could force, I don't wanna say force, but if we could require a deposit up front, at least there would be some portion of that available.
Do you think that the student could have a Kindle that would cross several different courses?
They could, absolutely.
Replace maybe 4 or 5 different textbooks,
It-
potentially.
At this, right, because for instance, Mr. Buckley's AP exam for AP textbook, $130. Now, for those of you that have Kindles, and, one of the things I've noticed myself, if I have a textbook on me that I'm attempting to utilize as a, not leisure reading, but, something that I'm trying to glean something from, it can be very difficult. I'm sure the younger generation is much better at this. I'm not sure how well, the AP Bio would fit on the screen. Those are some things that I do think before we move too far forward with that, we have to research.
It's probably a good idea, and we probably should not take out such a big bite that we're gonna choke on it.
Right.
I think it's coming.
Yeah, I
I
think
mean,
it's
that's
something we gotta
coming.
think about.
One of my daughters that was in college a couple of years ago talked about how they were talking about it at college level, just the practicality of, instead of kids toting a bunch of the heavy books around, that maybe they would want to get a Kindle, and they were just promoting it, just starting to promote it, and.
Yeah, some colleges have already gone through books.
Right.
I mean, that you can just download the whole thing, because every kid in college now has a computer.
Yes.
So they're not using Kindle, but they're using their actual computer.
Have you checked with any vendors out there that sell Kindles and they have a leasing program for a school?
We did not. I know that this was all kind of coming together, unfortunately, during the end of school, during Regents Week,
And it was promoted by the teachers.
and yeah, this is the English department really just doing their research. This took them days, obviously, to come up with all of this, to get all of the books that are on there. There might be a leasing program out there. I feel like $70, and maybe this is why I haven't pursued it too much, $70 for to me, I'm looking at textbooks,
I'm just thinking if you buy this type of Kindle and next year this thing comes out, you might be able to swap them.
maybe, and that's something we could look into, to see if,
Or we might be able to pass them down.
right, my thought was,
In the first year, it's just one grade level is going to be using them.
right,
Okay.
yes, and it's obviously the older students at this stage.
According to
Is there
how much
anything-
you got in the actual item on it.
Yeah, they do.
And it gave us, what did I get, $3,000
Calculators,
for,
right?
gravity calculator.
Salisbury too, might, through St. Lawrence. Yeah, do a kick up.
That's a really good idea.
One suggestion, get the covers, the padded covers.
Yes.
I know.
Because I know they
Yeah.
will take quite a shock, because I've got 2 of them.
We just purchased 15 of them for the extended day program for the students to use in the homework club after school, and got the covers.
And the covers were $10. I just thought it's not the same cover I had, but it's nice cover. It's
Yeah.
certainly comfortable, and will safeguard whatever we need.
So you're planning on using this like in the senior year English? Is there any way you can send something home to the parents so you see your child's getting a Kindle, use signs saying he's going to take care of it?
We're certainly, obviously, need to have a parent as well as a student signature, and I would love us to consider moving in the direction of a deposit. In the past, I've had success with that with Drive Red, not this year, but in prior years. Once I had a deposit, that was, it was a safeguard for us if a student dropped, the course, but in this case, if they do damage it.
Yeah.
I think even students themselves recognize this, although the price is the same, comparable, clearly it's a very different piece of, it's not the normal traditional textbook, so I would assume that they would treat it more respectfully.
Yes.
I'd like to think that.
Have we got any
Just my Drive Red students. So my current Drive Red students, it's a great idea, but,
Captain
no, that's certainly not, yeah, that's not.
And they're gonna disagree with you in a car.
They might, but.
Is there any way we can get down into the elementary? Because we have some gifted kids down there in the elementary.
Absolutely.
If they could just get 10 or a few classrooms there, to get them to read books beyond what they're reading in their normal classroom. Is there any way you're thinking about that?
We,
Not turning 50 pound
the process that I'm following, because I'm in the middle of the budgeting materials processing, is to really provide each of those classrooms with the absolute essential materials they need for absolutely what you're just talking about. Reading, differentiated reading, so students who are above grade level. There are some, but not all, teachers who are very curious about using something like a Kindle. We also have and use a lot of listen and read CD. Some people are still using tapes because they have hundreds of them, MP3s. So it fits perfectly in that category. And the nice thing is that because it's textbook aidable, it's not such a big undertaking. It would go in there seamlessly and quite cost effectively. There are a couple of classrooms where the teachers maybe are thinking about a Kindle instead of the new listening and learning materials. That's a little bit up for debate because those are really big instructional pages. That's an 8 by 10 page that a teacher really needs to interact with, and that's a tiny screen. So we may pilot a couple for educator use, but I would like to add the Kindle or something like an iPad or something like a laptop in right along with CDs, MP3s, cassette tapes, as part of that collection. Because it's true, a lot of those children, even if they're not high achievers, they need to learn to interact with that electronic tech. They just do, because that so is the reality. And as they move up, they would be that much more skilled when they get to the middle and the high school levels. And they do a lot of independent reading now where they're assigned a very specific task. Like right now they use a sticky note because they stick it in the book. But it would be use a card, ask a question of the text, be prepared and ready to talk about it. That doesn't have to be on a piece, that doesn't have to be a paper text, that could be an electronic text. Yep. So that's definitely on the radar.
By presenting this to us, are you looking for just our thoughts and opinions at this point? Are you looking for us to say?
What I would like I would like to move forward with 50 Kindles.
Okay.
And I would like to move forward with a deposit.
So, just a thought, I think it's a good idea, but it would help me personally, you know, if I had kind of laid out what you're gonna do, if you knew for sure you're gonna get this number of Kindles, and this is the deposit that you're gonna request, and this is the agreement that you're gonna ask people to sign, and you have the whole process laid out, and we could say that makes perfect sense, and we could kind of approve the whole package.
And it's already in her budget, so you don't have to approve the package.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, so that.
I don't know if that's what you're
She's just
looking
looking
for.
at it more modern and wanted you to be aware of.
I think it's a great idea.
possibilities. It's very exciting.
I think it's a great idea.
Right, so we're looking at 50 Kindles. If 50 Kindles is going to cost us, this is assuming we also buy the What Arabs Think book.
Okay.
So if we actually went with the whole thing, it'd be almost $5,000.
Versus what if you didn't buy the Kindle, you had to buy all that?
Oh, you've got that part because I didn't do the books.
What was that again?
It was $4,956, so almost pretty much $5,000 to get 50 Kindles and all the books that they need.
And is that before aid?
This,
Before it's an aid?
right, this is just the outright cost.
Right, but
with no-
even though it's aided, it still comes from the budget, right?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, right.
It's not in addition
Or
to
the
the
Kindle is
budget.
aidable as just like a textbook would be?
Yes,
It is,
yes, yes. It's gonna come right out of Texas.
Texas money.
So you're saying you want to use X number of books with a deposit idea. What would you do if you had 25% of your class that doesn't go along with the deposit? Do they still do the Kindle or do they do the?
I gotta talk
What
to
about
staff
paper
and see what, I would like to talk with the English teachers, to see what their thoughts are about that. I mean, obviously, we continue to try to collect the deposit, or maybe, give them their Kindle.
I think we should look at, once again, we've discussed is free and reduced lunch. There's some people that are not going to be able to deposit down, and I don't want a child not to have a Kindle because their parent can't afford it.
Exactly.
That's what we have, good idea to discuss.
My point was, some little kid sits in a classroom with an old book versus everybody in a whole.
Right,
I don't like that idea.
yeah, that's a good suggestion, right, yeah.
It's the new covers, are even waterproof yet? Because I know the Kindles aren't, they don't
Yeah,
accept
no.
any water.
Not that I know, I mean, I've been on the site quite a bit, just researching some of this stuff, and I don't know what's that.
I think if it's budget neutral, it's a really good place to start.
So what do you, how much money do we have in there for textbook aid?
We just looked at that, it's about 20,000.
And you're only spending
This is
$5,000.
gonna be about.
It's elementary and high school.
Yeah, 20,000 for both of
10
us.
and 10?
And it's actually a little more, because I think I had, what, 11 and you had maybe 15-ish, I wanna say, remember, because you had, yeah, so it's actually probably over 20.
And some of the money is also going to come from our title grants. If we run out of monies in certain areas, we do use that for that type of thing.
But there's no extra to buy extra. You think 50 is going to be enough?
I think that's a fair number to start with. One class, one entire group, one cohort.
All the other grades are still having to buy modules though, if we get modules, which I don't, do you have any idea when that's going to be decided in
No.
high school? When, yeah, that's.
I haven't heard any of this. Again, this is our step into preparation, we're actually gonna be ahead of the game if we move in this direction, because we'll have all the text ready to go. It might be just another investment next year, another 50 Kindles, or maybe, 100 Kindles, but this certainly is not bumping someone else's request for textbooks and.
And we've really put a halt on textbooks at this point, because most of the textbooks that are out there right now are not Common Core standards. So we're not purchasing new textbooks unless they're in the Common Core or the modules.
But if you had a Kindle, you can replace what's on
Oh, yes,
so much cheaper, and you can buy all those new textbooks.
of course.
And
The question I have with Kindle, do they need a Wi-Fi connection?
You need to get the books downloaded onto them, you do, but
So the
once
book
there.
itself doesn't require.
Right.
Okay.
And that was one of the things we talked about with the renovation, adding more Wi-Fi connectors throughout the building.
I'm
Because
just thinking
currently
if a
we
kid
don't
gets at
have.
home and he doesn't have Wi-Fi.
Right,
Yep,
then they
it's all
should
right.
download in class and make sure every time they leaves the room, it's downloaded.
Are they still expecting board members to read these books?
Yes.
Well, there's some books on there that they're going to need your approval.
Yes.
I don't know if we're
Yeah.
qualified, why don't the English teachers, they're
They're
qualified?
going to as well, but the board approves.
What we talked about doing is having, pick like their first whatever many books to start, have an English teacher and 7 board members on the committee. English teacher, and just break it up.
Okay,
Yeah.
but that won't happen in the fall.
Well, so I'm gonna have to,
I think, nice try, I think once we get these.
So we get the new Kindle Fire?
Well, maybe not a fire version, Tom.
So if there's a student that would rather have a book, are we gonna have some books on them as a backup in case they'd rather have a book written with it?
I don't really.
I think if you pilot, you have to do across the board pilot.
I don't think once they get one, they're gonna want a book. I mean, you can, those Kindles are nice.
And don't forget, you wanna spend every dollar of textbook money that you have budgeted, because that's a categorical aid.
Okay.
If you don't spend it, you receive less next year from the state, and then you can only spend up to that amount the next year. So you wanna spend every dollar of textbook money that you have.
And the state is increasing how you can use your textbook money. It truly used to be for textbooks. Now for like modules, you can actually use your textbook money to copy all the modules. So it really is increasing how you can use textbook money.
And one of the nice things is some of the books that are on there are actually free books on Kindle. They're free, any of us can get that, if you have Kindle. So that's another aspect of this, that's
The
nice.
ones that aren't, for sure, we got that added in.
Yeah, this is all, it's all taken care
It's
of.
all
What
figured.
they presented is exactly the list, with free and, cost for those that aren't.
Probably what you should do, Amy, is once they're ordered, speak to the English departments to find out what are their first novels for each grade level.
So we can get started.
Now, isn't there a summary somewhere we can go through, Cliff Notes or something? I mean, it tells us what's in
That's
each
up to you and your committee.
I'm sure a good
Not that I
portion of the
do
books are things that are fairly standard and traditional, but there are some that.
I see that.
Yeah. require-
And there are some that religiously will be a real problem and a question for some students. And in that case, we do have to offer other options. for students if the parent says, they're not reading that.
Well, we frown on staff or board members or the public coming in here and saying vile remarks to the students and using off-color language, sexual stuff, and yet you want to bring a book into the school that's full of that stuff. Maybe we should not do that.
Well, that's why I think especially the English department is looking for some support to,
And they're concerned by some of the
Right.
type, seriously.
right.
Sure, they are.
And I'm not so sure that, and I don't know the number that they're concerned about is large, but there are some that are glaringly obvious that we need to look at.
But I also know with one of the English teachers, we got into a big debate because it really, one of the books was prejudice. And I said, for some of the kids, if they don't learn about some of that in school, they're not gonna learn the other side. And it went back to Kill a Mockingbird. The teacher did not feel should be done at certain grade levels. And I'm like, that's been done for, how many years now, 50, 60 years, from 7th grade up. And that teacher didn't particularly like that book and did not feel that it should be taught here.
Some of these books we read when we were in high school.
Oh, yes.
That's what I'm saying, so it's up to each committee, and that's why you really need a committee of teacher and board and administration together. Because there's gonna be different opinions on different things.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's what's going on in the school right now.
That's good news.
Yeah.
That's it.